Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to our next installment of the new normal in government contracting, where we continue to talk about all of the wonderful things that are affecting our businesses as a part of the pandemic. Today, we are so very fortunate to have with us Nichole Atallah. Nichole is a partner in the labor and employment law practice with our very good friends, PilieroMazza. And Piliero has a long time been our partner and specializing in both government contracting as well as labor law, which is a perfect cross-section for today's topic, which is the executive order on COVID safety protocols that has recently come into play with so many government contracts. Nichole, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I know we want to talk about the executive order, but before we get there, let's do a little personal. Tell me what this has been like for the last year and a half for you personally dealing with the new normal. You're clearly working from home right now, and so am I. So
clearly. Yeah, I mean, I joke with my husband that I go into the office when we need some time apart because we have both been working at home for the duration with our two little ones. So we have some toddlers at home. And are so very lucky that they are in school this year and engaged, and we're not trying to play second shift. So it has been challenging, but it's also been great. I always tell my husband, I think we'll look back on this and think we got to spend some really, really great time with our family, which, we probably would not have gotten to do but for the pandemic. So we try to see the silver lining, but there are some tense days in the house.
I mean, I just think that that's exactly everybody's new normal. But as you point out, there are some silver linings. So I'm glad you found some of them. What about the team at Piliero? How have you guys been tackling business? Are you 100% working from home? Is it a mixture? I think I saw you're getting new office space, or you're in new office space.
Yeah, it's getting built out right now. So really excited about it. We started that search pre-pandemic. There were certainly some moments during the pandemic where we thought, do we need office space? Like, should we do this? Right? Should we sign this lease? This is crazy. But we were very fortunate that our staff really quickly transitioned to remote work without a hitch. Everybody was worried those first couple of weeks, like, what are we going to do? Everybody thought, oh, we're coming back, then we're not coming back. And, so we've been very lucky, but it also hit us at a very busy time. And so it was interesting to try to figure out how to work within our teams, how to keep those efficiencies, how to keep people connected during the pandemic. So we're still learning better ways to do that and better ways to connect with each other, because it is an important part of what we do as lawyers, to feed off of each other's thoughts and ideas. And sometimes you can feel like you're a little isolated and not talking to people. So we're still working on that, but I think our team has been great. We did soft open in September. So you can come in if you want to, but you don't have to come in, that kind of thing. And then looking towards the spring and new office space, hopefully we'll see some faces and kiddos will be vaccinated and no more variants, and we'll be good to go, hopefully.
From your lips to my ears, I tell you. No kidding. And congratulations on the new space. And also congratulations, to being in the industry as we are, which is that this may have brought on more work as opposed to less work, which is exactly what we're about to start talking about. Not everyone has been that fortunate. So congratulations. So let's get into a little bit of what we're here to talk about. We recently posted an article that you wrote for Piliero regarding the vaccine mandates that have come out as a part of the Executive Order 14042. Can you tell me a little bit more about our clients and contractors' obligations and how our listeners might better mitigate non-compliance?
Sure. So it was a little bit confusing when the executive order was issued, because it was issued with lots of different pieces, and some of those pieces haven't happened yet. And that is a bit confusing to folks. So the primary concern for federal contractors right now is this mandate to have everyone vaccinated by December 8th. And you'll hear that a lot. Everybody's got to get vaccinated or have a reasonable accommodation by December 8th. And then they'd already created this summer, this safer workforce task force, which we need to find a new acronym for them because it's a tongue twister. And I'm working on some lobbying in that area. But they put out this guidance that basically said, okay, this is how we're going to do this thing. But also included in that executive order was this reference to an OSHA emergency rule for commercial contractors over 100 people and paying for vaccination. And there was other stuff in there. What you need to understand is that stuff hasn't happened yet. The only stuff that's really happened yet is the piece about requiring vaccination and safety protocols for federal employees and for federal government contractors. And this task force issued guidance that said, hey, FAR Council, you're going to issue a FAR provision that lines up with these rules. And it's going to apply to anyone working on the contract, in connection with the contract. So anybody that might be in HR, payroll, estimating, anything like that. And then anybody working in the same facility as groups 1 and 2. So it really has spider webs, right? It reaches far into your organization, particularly if you have commercial work. It can reach all of those commercial people. It doesn't matter if people are working from home or not working from home. If they're working on or in connection with a covered contract, they get covered. Right now is what I think of as your grace period. You have until December 8th to get people vaccinated. So even if your contract is modified with this FAR provision tomorrow, your people still have until December 8th to come into compliance, right? You have until December 8th to come into compliance. But what happens if your contract's not modified till like December 20th? Well, you're required on day 1, no more grace period, right? So you're required to be compliant day 1 if your contract's modified after December 8th. So right now is what I'm calling the grace period. This is the time that the government's giving everybody to get their house in order, to figure out how they're going to come into compliance. And then after December 8th, no more grace period. As soon as you get that contract, you're required to be in compliance or your people can't work on that contract. We don't really know what there's no enforcement mechanism written into this other than your contracting officer could use their normal, you've breached your contract toolkit, right? So they could terminate your contract. They could tell people they can't work on the contract. They could say, hey, you're not authorized to work on the contract because you don't meet the requirements. There could be complaints, whistleblower complaints. So it's kind of we'll see how this pans out. Some agencies are taking
That's exactly how I like to deal with my
Right.
law.
Right.
We'll just see how it goes and cross our fingers and hope for the best. I mean, that's essentially what I think people are doing, right? They're putting their best foot forward to create a compliance program in the absence of written documentation of what that looks like. And really trying to do the best they can. For smaller contractors, it might be easier than for large.
Right.
But I think the lack of direction on something that is so serious. I mean, we have a huge GSA schedule clientele, and the latest refresh put this into play, and they're going to start removing people from the contract November 15th. So you have to sign by the 15th, saying that you'll be compliant by the 8th, right? But there's a lot of questions about what that means. So we'll be sending a lot of business your way for sure. Tell me what recommendations you've been giving contractors for those who are unsure about how to handle the exempted or just some of the religious exemptions, health exemptions. How are those defined and how do we handle that in light of what this order is doing?
Sure. So it's essentially a 2-pronged test. And I always tell contractors, have a system, have your people that are going to be reviewing these all kind of set and ready to go before you announce your policy. Some of them have probably already experienced this where they haven't even put out their policy yet and they're getting religious exemption requests, because people know this is coming. They're paying attention and they're at the ready. So it's a 2-part test though. The first is does it pass at least the smell test, right? So we're worried about compliance with the executive order on the one hand, and then not violating Title VII religious accommodations or ADA on the other side, right? So you got to get between those two goalposts. And so it's, does it pass the smell test? And then can you accommodate it, right? So, and there are themes to these. I see the same copy and pasted stuff from I don't want to get vaccinated.com, day in and day out. But there are a lot of them that do, even if the basis is factually inaccurate, they do, I think, have some sincere beliefs around some of this stuff. So the question is, some contractors really feel like they have to get in the weeds on it and really try to figure out, like, is this sincere or not sincere? Or, do I have to grant this or do I not have to grant it? Other contractors say, if I can just pass the smell test, and I don't want to get into the business of trying to determine if so-and-so's right or wrong or the other thing. So for a lot of contractors, it really just boils down to, can it be accommodated? What's the on-site requirement? Do they have clients that are saying they won't accept accommodations? Do they have to pay for testing? Is the requirement going to be that they pay for testing? Can they afford to pay for testing if they have a lot of people that request this exemption? Or is everybody working from home and we just don't care, right? So I can let them continue to work from home. They've been working from home. As long as I can say that I reviewed these in good faith and I complied with the executive order, I'm not going to get into it. So you kind of want to land between those two goalposts, which is easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, well, and it's also a lot less black and white than I think as an employer I want any of this to be, right? I mean, as we talk through this stuff, you want more direction, you want more, this is what it looks like. But at the same time, I talk to employers that have someone with a religious exemption that's worked for them for 20 years. And, they're not actively trying to not employ the people that have been loyal to them and vice versa. So it's a tricky thing. What do you think is the most important thing for government contractors to keep in mind regarding the executive order? And tell me a little bit about how you're helping clients with their compliance issues.
So I think understanding the timeline and how you could kind of run afoul of this thing is important. We have clients kind of call us and say, well, it has to be December 8th and I have no flexibility. Well, that's not exactly true, right? You're just gambling a little bit if you're not in compliance by December 8th. And we have some clients, we work with them to try to figure out the best strategy for their organization. Like, can you wait on contract A because you know that you have a high unvaccinated population on this contract? You're pretty sure that the government's not going to modify it in next week, and you really have to complete this project before you push. You can do that. You just really need to understand the risk that if you get that contract modification December 1st, you have 8 days to come into compliance, right? Or if you get it afterwards. So it's really understanding how flexible you can be and what your options are. I think there's a lot of information out there that it's very rigid, and it's not super rigid. It's just a risk, right? There are just risk propositions built in. And if we talk through them, sometimes we can find solutions to the challenge. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes at the end of the day, it's too risky. I can't do one contract and not another. My workforce is all commingled. I just can't take the risk. I've got to take the Band-Aid off. What we're doing to help clients is a lot of counseling. We have pre-prepared policies, notices to subcontractors, contract modifications. So we've worked really hard on our team as early as September 9th to try to get together kind of a package of information and resources that will help contractors, because we knew that this week we'd get 65 requests for policies, right? And they want to know, like, what should my policy say? The same questions you ask. How do we process accommodations? What kind of systems should we have in place? What do we do with this safety coordinator thing, right? So there's a component of the executive order where you have to appoint a safety coordinator in your organization to check transmission rates in the communities where you have workers and, how do we put all that stuff in place? So we've worked hard to try to build those resources and really be sometimes a therapist a little bit to our clients, but also a resource so that they can get this implemented quickly because the time is ticking. If somebody wants to take Moderna and meet the December 8th cutoff, October 27th is next week, right? That's a 6-week lead time to December 8th. So it's a lot of volume and a little bit of panic right now, but one step at a time, right? Just work.
Yeah. And there's also the whole question of cost, because as we are already in contracts that we bid as government contractors, there's this idea of compliance is costly. And we didn't bid this contract with those costs in mind. And yet we're being retroactively held to those standards. So I think, it's a little bit like CMMC in that way that you start to think through those things. So I am going to ask our audience to be sure to read your blog post. It is very helpful to me. I just keep thinking through all of these things and not having any one answer. You're more comfortable in that area. So I appreciate that. Tell me 2 things. Tell me how to reach you if our audience wants to reach out, and give me your sort of final thought for the day.
Sure. So you can reach me at PilieroMazza.com. You can find Nichole Atallah there, and Atallah at PilieroMazza.com. Or just call me. Frankly, you can just give me a call, 202-857-1000. Happy to take phone calls. Sometimes they're easier than emailing a time to talk. And, my final thought for the day is it's a lot like any other really big task in life. It's one step forward at a time, and use your resources, right? You've got a great network in Courtney and legal counsel. It doesn't even have to be me, but reach out. A lot of times there are resources there for you that are very low cost, that can bring your blood pressure down, and just one step at a time, and we'll get through it.
I really appreciate that. And during such a busy time and everything, I really appreciate your taking the time with us and our audience today. I can't thank you and PilieroMazza enough for being such a good partner to us. And thanks to our audience for spending the time listening. I know this is absolutely relevant in terms of what's going on right now. And we appreciate your 20 minutes or so. Thank you for joining us on the new normal in government contracting, and we can't wait to see you next month. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nichole.